Energy leaves evidence. And when you truly learn to read people, you begin to understand that nothing in this world is random. Everything a person has gone through, everything they have touched, everything they have engaged with on a deep emotional or physical level leaves an imprint on them. It becomes part of their vibration, part of their frequency. When you meet someone, you're not just meeting the smile on their face or the words they choose to say. You're meeting their history, their habits, their scars, and their hidden truths. A woman who has been with many men carries certain energetic imprints. And although she may never openly share them, those imprints leak out in ways that can be seen, felt, and experienced by someone who is attentive. Think about it like this. Energy is sticky. Every encounter leaves a residue. The body, the mind, and the spirit remember things that the conscious brain may try to forget. That's why sometimes when you walk into a room, you feel something in the air before anyone says a word. That's why when you meet a person, you instantly sense whether they are calm, chaotic, guarded, or free. Their history is not written on their forehead, but it's written in their energy field. And when it comes to intimacy, the energy transfer is even more powerful. This isn't about judgment. This is about understanding psychology and human behavior at a deeper level. A woman who has shared herself with multiple men carries layers of energy within her. It is not always visible in her looks or the way she dresses, but it's there in the way she moves, the way she engages, the way she responds to presence. She may have mastered words, but energy will always speak louder than words. You can notice a certain detachment when connection feels shallow, a certain restlessness when silence enters the room, or a certain overconfidence that acts as armor, but in truth is only covering up the vulnerability of her past. Energy evidence reveals itself in patterns. For instance, the way she holds eye contact might tell you more than you expect. If it lingers too long in a way that feels rehearsed or transactional, it might not be authentic connection, but rather habit, an old learned behavior from using charm to gain attention. On the other hand, a lack of eye contact, a difficulty to remain present, might also signal that too many experiences have dulled the ability to connect deeply with one. Energy doesn't lie, and when you study it, you can sense where a person has been without them ever admitting it. The residue also shows itself in her emotional rhythm. A woman who has carried too many experiences often has an inconsistent emotional flow. One moment she may appear deeply interested, and the next she feels distant. This comes from the subconscious trying to protect itself. After repeated intimacy, the heart begins to separate the body from the soul. It's a defense mechanism, because when something sacred is shared without alignment again and again, the body adapts by numbing the emotional intensity. That numbing becomes visible in the way she reacts to affection, in the way she processes kindness, in the way she engages when someone offers something genuine. You also see this energy in how she responds to silence and stillness. A woman carrying the evidence of many connections often struggles to be still. She may crave constant stimulation, constant movement, constant validation, because silence exposes what lies beneath. Silence doesn't just reveal truth, it forces her to sit with it. So she avoids it by seeking attention, conversation, or distraction. That avoidance of stillness is another piece of energetic evidence that can be felt if you're paying attention. There is also a noticeable shift in her perception of intimacy itself. When something has been repeated often, it loses its sacredness. It becomes mechanical rather than spiritual, and that shift in energy radiates outward. Instead of holding intimacy as something meaningful, she may treat it as casual, almost like a transaction. Even if she hides it behind charm or affection, the energy behind the action is different. It is lighter, less connected, and more focused on the surface and the depth. If you observe carefully, you will see this energy play out in how she approaches touch, how quickly she engages, how quickly she detaches afterward. Energy leaves evidence in confidence as well. There are two kinds of confidence, one that comes from inner alignment, and one that is manufactured as a shield. The first is calm, stable, and magnetic. The second is loud, exaggerated, and inconsistent. A woman who has carried the weight of too many past encounters often leans into the second type of confidence. She projects strength, but beneath it there is an undertone of fragility. You sense it when the mask sleeps, when she is caught off guard, when the conversation turns to depth rather than surface. Level charm. What you must understand is that this energy evidence is not about labeling or condemning. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing that every experience leaves a trace, and those traces cannot be erased simply by hiding the past. The human spirit remembers, the body remembers, the subconscious remembers, and together they project that memory outward into behavior, habits, and energy. You don't need someone to tell you their story. You can feel their story when you learn how to listen, not just to their words, but to their vibration. When you begin to look at how a person treats intimacy, you uncover layers of truth that are often hidden beneath the surface. Intimacy is not just physical closeness. It is emotional, mental, and spiritual connection. It carries with a certain sacredness, a certain value that speaks volumes about how someone views themselves and others. When intimacy is treated with depth, it has weight, has meaning, it feels alive. But when intimacy is treated casually, without boundaries or awareness, it begins to lose its essence. And once that essence fades, what should have been a bond turns into nothing more than a momentary transaction. A woman who has shared herself with many men will often have a noticeably different relationship with intimacy. At first glance, she may appear completely at ease with it, comfortable, confident, and even uninhibited. But beneath that surface comfort is usually a history that has reshaped the meaning of intimacy for her. Something that was once special, something that was once tied to trust, alignment, and vulnerability, becomes something she can separate from emotion. She has learned to disconnect the physical act from the emotional bond, and that disconnection tells a story louder than words ever could. When intimacy is repeated without depth, the human mind adapts. The first few times it carries deep emotional impact, but as it happens over and over without lasting connection, the brain begins to dull the sensitivity. It's like hearing a song you once loved too many times. The emotional reaction isn't the same anymore. It no longer feels unique. It feels familiar, even ordinary. This same process happens when intimacy becomes casual. That which was once extraordinary becomes routine, and routine rarely carries the magic it once held. You can see this in her behavior. When a woman treats intimacy lightly, she may not attach the same emotional significance to it that others do. She might engage quickly, without hesitation, because the threshold of value has shifted in her mind. Instead of seeing it as something to be guarded and shared with someone truly special, she sees it as something normal, something that can be given freely without consequence. That shift in perspective doesn't mean she is careless. It means she has conditioned herself to see intimacy differently. And when you spend time with her, that conditioning is evident in the way she moves, the way she speaks, and the way she chooses to connect. Another sign of this shift is in her ability to detach afterward. For many people, intimacy creates a strong bond, a longing for closeness, a desire for continued connection. But for someone who's repeated the experience with many partners, the emotional bond becomes weaker. It becomes easier to walk away, easier to shut off feelings, easier to treat the moment as just a moment. This isn't something she has to announce. It's something you feel in the aftermath. The absence of depth, the lack of emotional weight, becomes a clear indicator of how she views intimacy. You'll also notice how she talks about it, if she talks about it at all. Her language might reveal that intimacy isn't wrapped in emotion for her, but in convenience, validation, or even power. Some women use intimacy as a way to feel desired, to feel important, or to maintain control. Others use it simply as a form of entertainment, a way to escape boredom, a way to fill empty space. The word she uses, the casual way she refers to it, or even the lack of any emotional context when she speaks about closeness. All of these are reflections of how her relationship with intimacy has changed through repetition. Psychologically, the mind protects itself from pain. If intimacy has been given many times without true commitment, disappointment follows again and again. To shield itself, the mind learns to detach. It learns not to expect, not to invest too much, not to attach deep meaning. This becomes her default approach. Enjoy the moment, avoid the depth. That's why you might sense that she keeps her true self guarded even in moments that seem vulnerable. The act is there, but the soul is hidden. This relationship with intimacy also influences how she views men in general. Instead of seeing intimacy as a bridge to something deeper, she may see it as a tool, a strategy, or simply a habit. It becomes less about who the man is and more about the role he plays in satisfying a temporary need. That shift alters her ability to bond in lasting ways, because once intimacy is stripped of its deeper meaning, it no longer carries the glue that creates long-term connection. If you observe closely, you'll also notice that she may struggle with patience in relationships. Since intimacy has become casual, she may not understand the need to wait, to build, to grow slowly. Instead, the tendency is to rush, to skip steps, to jump straight into closeness without laying the foundation. But anything built quickly often lacks stability, and that instability becomes evident when the relationship faces challenges. Her relationship with intimacy is a mirror of her past. It reflects how she values herself, how she values connection, and how she views vulnerability. When intimacy has been overexposed, its sacredness fades, and when its sacredness fades, it transforms from a bond into a routine. And once it is a routine, it no longer has the power to tie her heart to another, because the heart has learned how to disconnect itself. The body always speaks a language far more honest than the words that come out of the mouth. Every gesture, every posture, every look, every movement is telling a story about where someone has been and what they have carried with them. You don't need to ask 100 questions. You only need to observe carefully. A woman who's been with many men reveals parts of her past, not through her words, but through the way her body expresses itself. The body cannot lie because it has been programmed and shaped by experiences. Even when the mind wants to hide or the tongue wants to deny, the body keeps showing small, most invisible signs that point toward truth. Notice the way she carries herself. A woman who has had a long history of intimacy often has a comfort level with her body that feels different. She might move with a kind of ease that suggests familiarity with being looked at, touch it, or admire it. Confidence in itself is not a negative thing, but when it crosses into a rehearsed display, when it feels practiced rather than natural, it tells you she has learned to use her body as a tool to get attention. That practiced ease, that effortless way of leaning in, brushing against someone, or holding posture, it is an indication that her body language has been shaped by repetition. Look at how she responds to physical touch. There are women who are delicate, cautious, and reserved with touch because they associate it with trust, care, and emotional depth. But a woman who has shared her body many times may show very little sensitivity to touch. She might react with indifference, or she might invite it too quickly without hesitation. When the sacredness is gone, the reaction becomes mechanical, almost casual. The body doesn't light up with vulnerability anymore. It responds with a detached normality. This lack of reaction, or the overly casual reaction, tells you volumes about how she views closeness. Her facial expression also tells their own story. Some women glow when they're in genuine connection. Their expressions shift naturally. Their eyes soften. Their smiles are unforced. But when someone's repeated intimacy with many partners, her expressions can feel calculated. She may give a smile that looks practiced, eyes that linger with purpose rather than natural emotion, lips that move in ways designed to entice rather than reveal true feeling. There is a difference between authenticity and performance. And the face becomes a stage where that difference plays out. Posture reveals history too. The way she sits, the way she stands, the way she holds herself in public settings often carries imprints of her past. Some women exude quiet confidence. A calm presence doesn't demand attention, yet commands it naturally. Others carry a posture that is almost too open, too inviting, signaling a history of craving or enjoying male attention. An open body language can be natural, but when it feels exaggerated, when it feels like she is always presenting herself, it shows that the body has been trained to be seen, to be noticed, to be engaged with. That training does not come from one or two encounters. It comes from repetition. Even her tone of voice and rhythm of speech are part of her body language. The voice is physical. It comes from the body, from the breath, from the energy of experience. A woman with deep, repeated exposure often develops a tone that carries flirtation as second nature. It slips into her voice without her even realizing it. The rhythm may be quick, playful, teasing, with subtle inflections that are meant to attract. These are things that become habits over time, shaped by interactions with multiple partners. The voice, like the eyes, like the hands, remembers, and that memory leaks out in how she communicates. Another sign comes in the way she handles space. When someone values their body as something deeply personal, they guard their space carefully. They don't allow just anyone to come too close too quickly. But a woman who has shared herself with many men often lacks those invisible boundaries. She may lean in quickly, allow closeness without hesitation, or step into your personal space as though it were nothing. This comfort with physical proximity isn't accidental. It is a sign that her body has lost the instinct to guard itself. The sacred boundary has been crossed too many times. And now it no longer feels sacred at all. Even the small details matter. The way her hands move when she speaks, the way she touches her hair, the way she maintains or avoids certain gestures. Each one is like a sentence in a book. Some gestures are unconscious signals of attraction. Others are habits built through repeated interactions. When you see those gestures happening too fluidly, too automatically, it shows a pattern that wasn't created overnight. It was created through repetition, through experience, through exposure. The language of the body also shows up in her reaction to stillness. In quiet moments when nothing is happening, how does she sit with herself? Does she fidget, adjust constantly, try to create movement to fill the silence? Or does she sit comfortably, grounded in her own presence? A woman with a long past often struggles to sit in stillness because stillness demands authenticity. The body betrays discomfort by moving, shifting, creating distractions. It's a physical manifestation of an internal struggle. And beyond all these individual signs, the most powerful clue lies in the overall energy her body radiates. The body has an aura, a vibration that comes from years of conditioning. Some women radiate innocence, restraint, and alignment because their history has been guarded. Others radiate a practiced sensuality, a looseness in energy that reveals that intimacy has been shared often. You can feel it without her saying a word. The body is always broadcasting signals, and the more attuned you are, the more clearly you'll understand the message. Validation is one of the strongest forces that drive human behavior, and when it comes to relationships, it becomes even more revealing. Everyone wants to feel seen, valued, and appreciated, but the degree to which a person craves validation says a lot about their history. When a woman has shared herself with many men, her relationship with validation often becomes exaggerated. She may not always be conscious of it, but her behaviors show a pattern, repeated need for reassurance, attention, and acknowledgement from men in particular. It's not just about enjoying compliments. It's about needing them to feel centered, secure, and significant. The psychology behind this is simple. When intimacy is given repeatedly without true emotional alignment, the woman begins to separate the act from her sense of worth. Instead of intimacy being tied to connection, it becomes tied to external approval. She learns that closeness gets her attention, admiration, or temporary affection, but it doesn't last. So the cycle begins. She chases the next compliment, the next glance, the next validation, hoping it will fill the emptiness left by the previous one. Over time, this becomes ingrained behavior. You can see it in the way she presents herself. A woman seeking validation will often be very conscious of how she looks, how she is perceived, how men react to her presence. She might dress in ways that highlight her physical appeal, not always for herself, but for the reaction it generates. She thrives on the eyes that turn toward her, the comments that affirm her attractiveness, the subtle cues that she is desired. This is not about self-expression. It is about creating an external mirror that reflects back a sense of importance. The more men look, the more she feels noticed. The more she feels noticed, the more her self-worth temporarily rises. Social interactions become a stage for validation as well. Pay attention to how she handles conversations. A woman deeply connected to herself engages with sincerity and presence, but a woman driven by validation often steers interactions in ways that guarantee attention. She may use flirtation as a tool, charm as a weapon, or exaggeration as a strategy. The tone of her voice, the way she laughs, the way she maintains eye contact, all of these may be heightened in a way that isn't fully natural but calculated. She is constantly measuring the response she gets, and if the response isn't strong enough, she adjusts until it is. Social media magnifies this pattern even more. Women who are addicted to validation often use digital platforms as their playground. Frequent posting of pictures designed to attract attention, cryptic captions meant to invite comments, or constant updates about their life become clues to this deeper need. Each comment, each direct message acts as a microdose of approval. It may satisfy her for a moment, but just like any temporary fix, it fades quickly. And she has to seek it again. This cycle never truly ends because external validation is never enough to fill an internal void. The hunger for validation also shows up in how she handles relationships. She may struggle to remain fully loyal to one man's attention because she has conditioned herself to feed on the attention of many. It doesn't always mean she will cheat, but it does mean she often places herself in situations where she can receive male acknowledgement. She may maintain male friendships that serve as a safety net for compliments, or she may keep old flames lingering in her messages just to know someone is still watching. This constant backup of attention sources ensures that she never feels unseen, but it also prevents her from investing deeply in one authentic bond. Even in intimate relationships, this validation-seeking behavior is present. She might constantly ask, "Do you love me? Do you think I'm beautiful? Are you happy with me?" Not because she doesn't hear it, but because hearing it temporarily soothes the insecurity inside. She may grow restless if her partner doesn't consistently shower her with reassurance, and she may interpret silence as rejection. This makes her dependent on external affirmation to maintain emotional balance, a dependence that stems from past experience where intimacy was mistaken for validation. Another layer of this pattern is comparison. Women with a history of seeking validation often compare themselves to others because their sense of worth is unstable. They look at how other women are viewed, how much attention others receive, and they measure themselves against that scale. This comparison fuels the cycle further. They must work harder to get noticed, dress more provocatively, speak more boldly, act more playfully. It is never enough because no matter how much validation they receive, someone else is always getting more. The irony is that the more validation she seeks, the more obvious it becomes to those who are paying attention. Men who are aware can see the difference between confident and one who is hungry for approval. Confidence is grounded, calm, and steady. Validation-seeking energy is restless, loud, and inconsistent. It feels like a constant performance, a constant reaching outward, rather than being anchored inward. The craving for validation becomes the very evidence of her past, because it shows that her worth has been tied too many times to how others view her, rather than how she views herself. When you look closely at someone's emotional patterns, you begin to notice that people who have given themselves away repeatedly often create walls around their hearts. Those walls are not always visible in the beginning. They may smile, they may laugh, they may even seem open. But if you observe long enough, you realize there are guardrails protecting them from being fully vulnerable. A woman who has been with many men learns, consciously or unconsciously, that emotional exposure can lead to pain, disappointment, and betrayal. So to survive, she builds protective mechanisms that prevent her from feeling too deeply, even when the situation appears intimate. This emotional guarding shows itself in many ways. At times, it comes across as detachment. You may notice that she participates in moments of closeness, but her eyes drift away, her tone changes, or her body language stiffens when things begin to move from physical to emotional. She might be fully present during lighthearted moments, but when the conversation shifts toward depth, toward dreams, fears, or vulnerabilities, she begins to close off. That closing off is a subconscious way of saying, I've been here before, I've trusted before, and I don't want to get hurt again. The repetition of intimacy without long-term security conditions her to protect herself, even if that means sacrificing authentic connection. Sometimes these emotional guardrails manifest as independence pushed to the extreme. Independence itself is healthy, but when it becomes a shield, it no longer serves growth, it serves avoidance. A woman may constantly remind you that she doesn't need anyone, that she's fine on her own, that she doesn't depend on anyone emotionally. On the surface, this looks like strength, but underneath, it is often a defense mechanism. By convincing herself and others that she doesn't need emotional closeness, she avoids the vulnerability of admitting that she actually craves it. These guardrails keep her safe from potential pain, but they also keep her from experiencing genuine intimacy. Another form of emotional guarding is inconsistency. One day, she might open up, share personal stories, speak about her feelings, and give you a glimpse of her inner world. But the next day, she retracts, becomes cold, changes the subject, or avoids communication. This push and pull dynamic can be confusing, but it is simply the result of an inner conflict. Part of her wants connection, but another part of her has been hurt enough times that she pulls away to protect herself. This inconsistency is not accidental. It is the evidence of scars created by too many unaligned experiences. Her difficulty with trust is another layer of these emotional guardrails. Having been with many men, she may have learned to expect disappointment. Even if you've done nothing wrong, she may question your intentions, doubt your words, or assume you're just like the others she has encountered. This skepticism becomes her way of staying safe. If she doesn't fully trust, she won't fully get hurt. But the irony is that the very guardrails meant to protect her end up preventing her from forming the kind of bond that could heal her. She keeps love at arm's length, never allowing herself to dive deep enough to experience its fullness. Pay attention also how she responds to gestures of kindness or genuine affection. Sometimes women with strong emotional guardrails struggle to accept love openly. They may downplay it, laugh it off, or act as though it doesn't matter. That reaction is not because they don't appreciate it, but because they are uncomfortable with receiving something so pure when their past has conditioned them to expect conditions or ulterior motives. The guardrails make it hard for them to relax into genuine affection because their minds are constantly scanning for danger, waiting for the catch, bracing for disappointment. There is also a certain numbness that develops over time. When intimacy has been repeated without true connection, the heart begins to detach from the experience. The emotional bond becomes weaker. The joy of vulnerability fades, and the woman begins to operate more from the surface than the soul. This numbness is part of the guardrail system. It is her way of not feeling too much, of keeping herself from being consumed by emotions that can lead to pain. But with that numbness comes a hollowness, a lack of depth that becomes noticeable when you try to connect beyond the surface. The most telling part of these emotional guardrails is how they reveal themselves in silence when there's nothing to distract, when there's no conversation or activity. How does she handle the quiet? Many women with strong guardrails become restless in silence because silence brings them face with emotions they've tried to suppress. She might avoid eye contact, reach for her phone, change the subject, or create movement to break the stillness. Silence strips away the distractions and exposes the raw self, and for someone carrying guarded emotions, that rawness feels too vulnerable to reveal. All these patterns, detachment, independence, inconsistency, mistrust, numbness, are not random. They are the results of repeated experiences that have conditioned her to protect her heart. The more time she has given herself without alignment, the more her subconscious builds these walls. They are not built overnight. They are built brick by brick, memory by memory, until one day the walls feel like part of her personality. But in truth, they are not her essence. They are her defense. They are the guardrails she uses to keep herself safe, even if it costs her the fullness of connection she truly desires. Truth is not something you always need to ask for, because truth has a way of revealing itself through patterns. A woman may tell you one story, but if you pay attention to her actions over time, you will begin to notice whether her words align with her behavior. Consistency is the key to authenticity, and inconsistency is the signal of hidden layers. When someone has lived through a complicated past, especially one involving many different partners and shifting experiences, it becomes harder for them to keep the story straight. The cracks show up not because they want them to, because the human mind cannot perfectly cover the patterns of repetition. You might hear her say that she values intimacy deeply, yet observe that she engages in it casually. You might hear her describe herself as selective, yet notice how quickly she entertains attention from multiple directions. This gap between words and actions is not always intentional deceit. It's often subconscious. She may even believe her own words in the moment, but her habits reveal the reality she has lived. The body remembers. The subconscious remembers, and sooner or later, her choices align more with her past conditioning than with the narrative she tries to present. Consistency requires stability, but when someone has lived through a history of shifting relationships, stability becomes difficult to maintain. A woman who has experienced many men has likely worn different masks in different contexts. With one man, she played the role of the nurturer. With another, she played the role of the adventurer. With another, she played the role of the carefree spirit. Over time, these roles blend together. And when she tries to present herself as one consistent person, the fragments leak out. Her contradictions are the fingerprints of the lies. She has lived in different settings. One of the clearest signs is how she speaks about her values. She may emphasize loyalty, but her past behavior suggests otherwise. She may speak about wanting something serious, but her actions lean towards short-term excitement. She may claim she is done with casual interactions, but her habits, how she communicates, how she entertains attention, how she positions herself socially say the opposite. The contradiction is not in what she wishes, but in what she has been conditioned to pursue. It's the difference between what she consciously wants and what her subconscious defaults to. You can also see these contradictions in how she talks about men. On one hand, she might say she doesn't trust them, that men are all the same, that she has been hurt too many times. On the other hand, she still keeps them around, entertains their interest, thrives on their attention. If she truly didn't care, she would detach fully. But the pattern of needing validation draws her back into the cycle she claims to despise. This inconsistency between her words and her actions reveals not only her history, but also her struggle to break free from it. Another layer of contradiction is in how she presents her independence. Many women with complicated histories project strength and self-sufficiency. They speak about how they don't need anyone, how they are focused on themselves. how they are past the games. Yet, if you observe, you might notice that she still craves external attention, still places herself in situations where she can be admired, still responds to the energy of men around her. The contradiction here lies in the duality of her desire. She wants to appear untouchable, but deep inside she still yearns for recognition. The way she manages time and commitments also reflects this inconsistency. She may say she wants stability and a future with someone, but her actions show impatience, a tendency to rush, a lack of follow-through. She may start things with enthusiasm, but lose interest quickly because her pattern has been one of repetition rather than long-term building. The past has taught her to move quickly, to chase the next thing, to seek new stimulation. This restless energy is at odds with the words she uses to describe her desires. Even in small daily interactions, contradictions can be seen. She might act possessive in one moment, then detach in the next. She might express deep affection today, then withdraw tomorrow. She might talk about trust, but secretly keep conversations alive with multiple men. These contradictions are not random. They are symptoms of a divided self, a self that has been stretched across too many experiences to remain fully aligned. What's important to recognize is that consistency builds trust, while contradiction weakens it. When you see a pattern of mismatched words and actions, it tells you that the person has not reconciled with their past. They may be trying to move forward, but the past is still present in the way they behave. Their habits, shaped by years of repetition, reveal more than their spoken intentions. And if you are sensitive enough, you can feel the difference between a woman who is aligned in truth and one who is living in fragments. These contradictions don't always show themselves immediately. In the early stages, she may seem convincing, her words may sound genuine, and her presentation may appear polished. But over time, when the initial performance fades, the true patterns begin to emerge. Inconsistency is not a mistake. It is the subconscious revealing what cannot stay hidden. It is the truth breaking through the surface, showing you who she really is beyond the words she carefully chooses.